Yang Train. What's up, everybody? Welcome. I'm here with a very special guest today, Mr. Christopher Wallace. All right, so there's a few things I want to get in for today's podcast, Chris, but let me just set the stage real quick.
Okay.
Yang did not make the January debates that are going to happen in, I believe, 4 or 5 days, supposedly. So this is the first time he hasn't made a debate. Now, there's also a small interesting part of this where it's being held somewhere in Iowa, and Iowa votes, I believe it's February 3rd.
Oh, yeah, they do vote early.
They're the first state to vote.
Yeah.
So it's like, because at the end of the day, this is what it all comes down to. It's Iowa. If Yang can get about 50,000 people to go vote for him, to caucus for him in Iowa, he'll be probably in the top 3. Oh. If he's in the top 3, New Hampshire votes second. The biggest party in New Hampshire is Independents, I believe. So not Democrats, not Republicans, right?
Independents.
It's a good chance he can pull a lot of them too as well. So this is it. This is the end, almost the end of the road. We're going to see how this entire campaign has progressed. And as of right now, based on kind of what you hear, if you hear much at all, how is it looking in terms of who you see to be the front runners right now?
Oh, I don't hear anything about politics.
Okay, perfect. But it's still the big 4, right? We still got Bernie, still got Biden, Elizabeth Warren's kind of plummeted, and then we still have Pete Buttigieg. Or Paul, or whatever we decided his name is, right?
We'll just call him Paul.
Just call him Paul, right? So it's still those 4. So, and even since we last had this podcast, they've been kind of weaving in and out of each other. It seems like Bernie and Biden are the big 2, and then the other 2 are kind of holding that second place. And then we still got this underdog, this dark horse, Andrew Yang, which unfortunately he's not polling in the type of percentage that I would have liked to have been. But either way, we're all going to see the effects of this in a month. Iowa is less than a month away. That's where this all really plays out, and it's insane. Now, I will say this, because I think it was in the second, or actually both the first and the second episode, where you kind of make jokes of the whipped cream.
Yeah.
Apparently, that's a big thing for a lot of people. Like, I don't get it. Like, on my Instagram, people will be commenting, and these are usually conservatives, about, oh, is that the guy who put whipped cream in that guy's mouth? No way I'll vote for him. He's not presidential. And it's like, and I'm looking at who they go for. I'm assuming it's Trump. So, and I know you kind of know of this. I know your mother probably is aware of this because she watches Fox News.
Yeah.
If you can give me a slight perspective on like why that even matters, I guess. Or is it just like one thing, the only thing that you need to say no to somebody, then that gives you a way out kind of thing?
This is weird.
Who doesn't love whipped cream?
It's weird.
How is it weird?
It's a little weird. It's a little weird. I don't know. You said something about how it was like you didn't say it on the podcast because it kept dodging my question, but you said it was something about like a customer or something there.
So I believe the story behind that was because they had just opened an office, and when it comes to New Hampshire, it's some kind of tradition where when you first open an office, part of the office opening is having the candidate pour whipped cream into somebody's mouth.
Oh.
Now, for whatever it's worth, I'm sure these other candidates have opened new offices throughout the duration of this, season, and we haven't heard any other videos or seen any other videos of them putting whipped cream in people's mouths.
Yeah.
So perhaps they know better, ? Even though it's like, to me, it really doesn't matter. But I guess for some other people, it does, where it's like, you just need one thing and say, all right, that's weird, I'm not about it.
I don't know, I like to joke about it, but it doesn't bother me that much. I mean, number one, who doesn't like pouring whipped cream into their mouths? I mean, come on.
Yeah, people
two,
do that.
Like, everybody's done it. And number 2, yeah, I mean, it's a little odd, but like, I mean, Trump's done a lot of odd things himself.
He's done arguably a lot more things that are not necessarily just odd, but also, let's say, not even out of character because it's well within his character. Just not good things. Like, for example, the thing that a lot of people will always remember Trump about that are not fans of him, the grab him by the pussy thing.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if we're comparing the two between the whipped cream and that, just being objective, one doesn't matter nearly as much as the other. And if you think that the grab him by the pussy thing is not a big deal, I hope you keep that same energy with the fucking whipped cream, because it really doesn't matter. For me, I kind of feel like those kind of people are not fan of Democratic candidates anyway. So if they can have something that they kind of latch onto that gives them a reason to say no, then that's enough, whether it's warranted or not. Now, this is actually going to get into something pretty interesting. You kind of have an idea of what's going on between U.S. and Iran.
Right.
what's kind of your perspective on, because I'm sure you've seen a lot of memes.
Right.
I've definitely seen a lot of memes.
All the World War III memes.
Yeah, and some of them are funny. But of course, like, the reality would not be something I hope anybody's excited about. Because here's my thing about this, and I'll let you go. If anybody's genuinely excited about the war with Iran, I hope they keep that same level of intensity and they enlist. Otherwise, you making all these fun jokes about, oh, we're going to fuck them up, like, those are people's sons and daughters that are putting their lives in line for you, you know? Just to make fun of it. And then 2, we gotta stop fucking going to war with all these countries.
Yeah.
And Yang and a few other candidates, Tulsi Gabbard's huge on this, where it's, we gotta end these regime change wars.
Yeah.
Trump was all about getting out of the Middle East when he was running for presidency.
It's one of the big reasons why a lot of people voted for him.
And now look at this.
And now look at this, yeah.
So, but like, your perspective on everything, like, what do you think is the potential outcome of where we're at? What would you like to see the president do differently in terms of handle the situation? Just anything at all that's related to this.
Listen, speaking from an independent, I'll say this. One of the things I liked about Trump, and I'll be honest, one of the things I did like about him was that he talked a lot about focusing primarily on America, and then talking about getting out of the Middle East and everything.
Right.
Because the thing is, we have a lot of issues domestically. We should be focusing on ourselves, first before anyone else.
Right.
To be honest with you, and which a big part of that would be investing more away from our military, maybe, and investing more into our
own infrastructure.
Yeah, infrastructure and everything, right? Education, so on and so forth. So, like, pulling us out of the Middle East, dramatically, at least dramatically reducing our presence over there would be, a really smart thing. And the whole escalation with Iran and everything, seems like it's just raising tensions throughout the whole region. And then Iraq wants us out now, and it's like,
yeah.
And apparently we're refusing to leave, from what I heard. It just seems like it's getting more and more intense. And I think the best thing is just for us to get out of it. Just honestly, just like let them do what they're going to do, and focus primarily on ourselves and taking care of ourselves.
If there wasn't so much goddamn oil over there, we'd be out.
Yeah.
That's the truth. That's why we're not in North Korea.
But that's why we gotta invest. Because I'm telling you right now, like, okay, so, this is 21st century. We know that oil and everything is not good for the environment.
Not at the rate that we're using it,
yeah,
yes.
Exactly. We're also going to run out of it. We're also dependent on other regions for it. Why not take the money that we have going towards the military spending and everything and start investing it on renewable energy?
Yes.
You cannot tell me in this day and age, in 2020, that solar power is not a reliable source of energy when a lot of people are switching to it.
Sun's very reliable. That shit comes up every single day.
That wind energy, that all this stuff that we can do now, all this stuff that they're coming up with, you really seriously can't tell me that we cannot at least convert a good chunk, maybe not the entire country, but a good chunk of our energy demand over to renewable energy. Mm-hmm. Because right now we focus primarily on oil, gas, coal.
Yes.
All this. We need to get away from that.
Yeah.
Because especially oil right now, because we're relying on whole different region of the world that can completely cut off our supply and everything. Look at the 1970s. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
I know I'm going on a little bit on a tangent.
Go ahead.
Go on a tangent.
Go ahead.
Look at the 1970s. Was it the 70s? I'm thinking it's the 70s. Where it's like they cut off our oil supply and suddenly there were long lines and everyone was freaking out. I mean, just look what happens here, in our home state of Florida.
When we know the prices are going to go up. Yes.
Not even that. When there's a hurricane announced, God forbid you were like 2 hours late and there is no gas anywhere in town.
Yes, you're in line to not get gas.
Solar panels on your house and charging your car.
Yes.
You have no problems with that. Mm-hmm. And the problem I think right now with electric vehicles in this country is that there's not enough electric stations and such.
Yes.
To supply them. And then of course
it's like an early adoption phase.
I've seen the meme, and this is big on conservatives too. Conservatives love posting this, where it shows like a Tesla charging station, but it's run on a propane tank.
Right.
Okay, that's a good point. So why not replace it with solar panels? Solar panels, from what I understand, have gotten cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper.
That's
over
what
the
Elon
years.
Musk is doing with Solar City, I believe. He's making it very not only efficient in terms of how they run, but affordable in terms of how much they cost.
Mm-hmm. I got a buddy of mine from high school. His name is Kevin. I was hanging out with him recently. Noticed there were solar panels at his house and everything. And I was like, Kevin, I didn't realize he had solar panels. It's like brand new, just installed them in the last year and everything. My parents love them. And he told me, it's like the price of energy that they pay is like nothing, practically nothing.
Right.
I mean, all of their energy comes from pretty much their solar panels. They get very little energy from the grid.
Really?
So when they lose power, when the rest of the city loses power and everything like that, God forbid for whatever issue.
Right.
Guess what? They're still watching Netflix. They're still on there. They're still relaxing. They're still binge watching their favorite shows. They're watching The Witcher. Or whatever they're watching. I don't know.
Disney
but I'm
Plus.
telling you now, renewable energy. So you know what? That's all I got to say. Anyways.
And Yang kind of talks about it too, where so China is essentially outsourcing a lot of like coal plants and different things of that nature that burn cheap fuel to Africa, because at this point they just need energy. They don't give a fuck if it's economically friendly, if it's good for the environment.
China's like the worst polluter in the
They
planet.
just need the energy.
Yeah.
So of course, hey, we'll take the cheap energy, and then there's some bartering going back and forth. It's like, all right, we'll give you these, but then we want to, have access to certain resources or very cheap labor, because China can't get any other cheaper labor other than Africa. Like you can't get any cheaper labor than that, right? We go to China for stuff. China goes to Africa for stuff.
Right.
So, and Yang talks about this too. Is like the reality is that when it comes to the United States, we are only 15% of global emissions. So even if we went zero by tomorrow, all natural forms of gaining energy, whether it be wind turbines or solar panels, 85% of the world is still out there doing the problem, if we're trying to, include it in the climate change problem of polluting our planet. So even if we went zero, it still would not be enough. We would only diminish the rate by a little bit, because the rest of the world, India, China, they're burning a lot of fucking fuel.
Yeah.
So the way to counteract this problem is you have to have the government and the United States subsidize cheaper forms of greenhouse gases, of green forms of energy.
Right.
Wind turbines, going to Africa saying, hey, we know China's charging X amount of whatever your currency is to have these plants installed. We'll do it for the same price. This is green. It's going to give you a lot more energy. It's going to be a lot more efficient, this, that, and the third. We just have to flat out outcompete them. Now, the prices might not be the same in terms of how much it costs us, but the government would need to subsidize some of that so that way it's competitive, because that's the only way you're going to be able to counteract that, because you can't get any cheaper than what they're doing right now. Just to flat out outcompete them. And unless we can come up with that level of a solution where we're doing that already, nothing's going to be done in terms of us as an Earth, right? Going and making this climate change problem real. And I talked to a lady at my gym one time, and we were kind of getting on the climate change thing. And she seemed to be an older conservative, where she thinks it's all a hoax or whatever. And I just flat out told her, I hope you're right. I really hope you're right. Because if you're wrong, you're not going to be here to see the effects of it. I will, and your grandchildren will. So let's just hope you're right, lady. Yang also talks about this too. It's very hard to convince people to worry about climate change, because usually a few thoughts pop into their head. My life's going to get more convenient in some way, whether it be now you got to do a plastic straws, you got to do paper straws or whatever. Maybe your food's going to be more expensive because now the meat's going to be more because cows fart a lot and they pollute a lot of shit. Some level of collateral where it's more of an inconvenience to you.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, Yang says it's very tough to get a lot of people on board with climate change when they can't pay their bills.
Right.
Why the fuck am I worried about what's going to happen in 10 years, or if it's now, or if it's in 20 years, when I'm worried about next month?
Right.
If 70% of the country is living paycheck to paycheck, you got to get that boot off of their throat, and that way they can actually start seeing the bigger picture, because while they're over there locked in their situation, they're not really listening to what's happening.
Right.
They're worried about themselves, their family, their children next month, let alone 10 years from now, when this is all supposedly going to be a really big problem. And Yang talks a lot about it too. The best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. Second best time is now. There's a lot of ideas that he got influence from. Jay Inslee, I believe he was like the big climate change guy, who was a governor of somewhere. He had already dropped out of the race. Yang's more than willing to go ahead and implement whatever works. But the big thing is that he recognizes that it's a problem, and the only way to get the country galvanized on board is to make sure that there's not something that's prioritized that's weighing them down from even seeing that, which is, at the end of the day, your finances. Again, like 50%, almost 50% of the country cannot afford an extra $500 bill.
Right.
Which means if you get into an accident, you get sick, you get hurt, something else happens, maybe like whatever act of God, right? Now you're in financial ruin.
Yeah.
So like that level of stress in the richest, greatest country in the history of the world, economy's at 20 trillion per year. That's insane. We got that big bank. But the problem is, and this goes into the Amazon thing, when you have a company like Amazon soaking up $20 billion worth of commerce, paying $0 in taxes, less than you and I, but they're closing 30% of our malls and stores.
Yeah.
That's a huge revenue and expense problem.
Uh-huh.
So it's not going to sustain itself. And what Yang talks about is this: if this keeps going, we're going to see the most drastic situation of a winner-take-all economy that we have ever had in the history of the world, where the top people are going to be fine, everybody else is going to be fucked.
Yeah.
And if we continue to let this go, it's not going to be a situation that we're going to be excited to go through. People like to cite the Industrial Revolution. And it's like, oh, we've been through this before. And he made this point, and I thought this is actually very profound. It's like, in any situation of life, if you try to pinpoint a data point that happened over 100 years ago, fuck right off. You know? You're going to try to say, oh, we've been through this, but bitch, a century ago, the times have changed.
Yep.
What the fuck? It's predicted that this Industrial Revolution would be 30 times faster and worse, more expensive, more costly than the last one. And we've already seen, because we talked about truck driving, how that's going to be automated away. Yep. We've already seen that truck drivers have started to do protests where it's called slow rolls, where they line up in a highway and they drive slowly. That is to protest the digital monitoring of their drive time. Because truck drivers can only drive maximum 14 hours a day, and then literally the truck will shut down because that's how they're designed, so that way the driver isn't going 15, 16 hours a day where it becomes very dangerous.
Right. Which
makes sense. I mean, that's a fucking hard job. I drove to Miami for about a month ago. That was 5 hours one way, 5 hours back. That sucked. I'm not a truck driver, so I'm not built for that. But no doubt that shit's hard on your body, hard on your back, hard on your legs, hard on your social life. If you got a family, fuck that.
Yeah.
And Yang also cites this too, and I'm curious on your thoughts of this. So he talked about the 4 million jobs that were manufacturing jobs that we lost. Half of those people never worked again, and half of that group filed for disability. So 1 million people filed for disability. How many people, if you think that we have like 3 million truck drivers that we're going to automate away, those jobs, how many of those people do you think are going to file for disability? You think maybe they got some bad backs, some of those truck drivers?
Yeah, I'll say.
Some chronic illnesses? And then, okay, we're just going to add more people to disability? I guess. But then that kind of, adds more into the government bureaucracy and that social safety net that people hate talking about, right? Yep. That conservatives hate dealing with. We hate giving people free money. I can't tell you how often I get so much shit on my Instagram and my social media from a lot of people that are, oddly enough, either Republicans, right, conservatives, or Bernie supporters. Those are the two groups. Everybody else is like cool with me.
Interesting.
And I get it with the Bernie supporters. They got fucked last time around. Absolutely shafted. Bernie should have won. So now they're like on edge where it's like we're gonna get Bernie through no matter what. And anybody who's a threat, is like fuck you. So I get it. I'm very empathetic. But especially the conservatives, and this is why I want to talk to anybody in your family that's a conservative, because there's so many interesting points. Because off the top of your head, what would be some of the things that would immediately stand out into your mind as like a no-go for conservatives when it comes to Andrew Yang, in particular, the freedom dividend? Just off the top of your head, what would some of your family members say?
They'd say that we'd be paying more in taxes and such, and that the money would be coming out of our paychecks for...
Right. Why are you taking my money to pay for all this, right?
That's pretty much it.
The level of, I imagine, like laziness, like, nobody's going to work and shit, right?
Yeah. And it's just going to be like increasing taxes on us, and then it's going to hurt us.
Right. It's like, then everything's going to be $1,000, and then you can't get anything. And again, we kind of talked about this last time, but there's a few interesting data points. And it's really tough to relay this information through Instagram, where you have to write everything out. And by the third or fourth reply, it's like nobody's interested. And then it's on to the next day where there's another 3 posts. So that gets lost from me anyway. But I like to remind people, because most people don't know this, petroleum dividend in Alaska. Every Alaskan citizen gets between $1,000 and $2,000 a year from the oil money. And this dividend was passed by a Republican governor. Alaska is a deep red state. This has stayed for over 40 years. They like it because it's universal. It's not a rich to poor transfer. It's not you're getting it and I'm not. We're all getting it because we're Alaskans.
Right.
There's a lot of Indian tribes that get a lot of money from casinos, where they said, all right, we're going to disperse the money between all our people. I have a buddy of mine that went to college. When he turned 18, he had like over $100,000 in the bank from the money he secured from the casinos in his tribe. And it does a lot, bro. And people always talk about, it's just free money. No, it's not. It is not free money. It's every transaction, because of this value added tax that I'd be paying for it. And most of it would be from these tech companies, these liberal tech companies that conservatives hate, right? They hate how Facebook's censoring us and how YouTube's censoring us and how Google's making it, this, that, and the third. And most of the money is coming through them because they do a lot of automation, a lot of processes using a lot of AI and technology that cut out human work, but still retain a lot of value. So if you're one of those conservatives where you hate these tech companies because they're liberal and they don't fucking, like Republicans and shit, well, there's that argument to it too. There's the biggest problem with, I don't want to say the biggest problem, but the most frustrating part about Andrew Yang as a candidate is, and this goes to his slogan, Make America Think Harder, it requires a lot of thought to understand and to at least accept. Because what were some of your first thoughts when I told you about this guy and then you heard about the $1,000 a month? What were some of the things going through your head?
I don't know. I thought it was kind of, if you just hear about it, he's like, he's nuts. Like $1,000 a month for every citizen. It's like, that's just going to create our taxes go through the roof.
Right.
He's nuts. It's never going to work. Mm-hmm. That was pretty much, yeah.
And a lot of people have that. And by the way, the first thing I say when somebody has that thought is I empathize with you because I thought the same thing. And it seems pie in the sky, it seems ludicrous. But then I want you to imagine a town of 500 people where it's getting smaller and smaller. And it seems like the only way to have a reasonable life is to get out of your town because your town's being depleted. And then Andrew Yang becomes president. And now that town has the opportunity, because not everybody's going to, sign up for this. Maybe they might be skeptical. I get it. But now that town has the opportunity to bring in $500,000 every month. There's a lady who bakes fucking awesome cookies. And now she's like, wait a minute. I'm getting this money. My husband's getting this money. Everybody in this town's getting this money. I'm going to open up a bakery. And my neighbors, they always love buying my goods. They never could before. I would always have to make them during events. But I know they would support me every morning buying my baked goods. Mm-hmm. And now we have a job, but I got to hire people because I can't do this shit myself. I'm going to hire for a few of the high schoolers or this veteran that's always, been nice to me. And that is how you trickle up, right? That's the trickle up economy that Yang talks about.
Yep.
And we're a month away from seeing if this is all real or pie in the sky. If Yang was at 10% right now, I'm sure he'd be getting a lot more hate mail from Bernie supporters and Trump supporters. He's the dark horse. I believe he's going to shock the world when he becomes one of the top 3 candidates voted in Iowa. And then we got New Hampshire. And then we got, I think it's South Carolina, and then Nevada, and then California. We're less than 2 months away from all of this, all these memes, these podcasts. We're going to see how this ends. Yep. I'm very hopeful. And obviously it doesn't look too good that Yang is not going to make this upcoming debate. But here's what I like about it. Now his back is officially against the wall. He's been punched, right? For whatever reason, and there's a whole discussion on why he didn't make the debate qualifications. There's a whole discussion behind that. But now we can see, all right, when your back is behind the wall, Yang, you raised $16.5 million in the last 3 months. Let's see what you got. Let's see what ads you can do. Let's see how you can put the money to work. Let's see how you can get your message out. This is your opportunity. How far will you go?
Right.
And that excites the fuck out of me. But any last words you want to say for today's podcast based on everything that you heard?
No, I mean, we'll just wait and see what happens. And, hopefully he's able to stay in. Hopefully he doesn't throw in the towel.
And shock the world. He's definitely not going to throw in the towel until New Hampshire. If he's able to get in the top 3 in Iowa and or New Hampshire, then we're good all the way through. If not, then it's starting to look a little bleak.
Yeah.
It's already starting to look not too great right now because, again, I would love it for him to be at 10% and then Bernie's at 20%. So it's like, oh, we're right there, baby. That's not the case. But at the end of the day, the difference between Yang winning it all and him just being a fucking awesome experiment of a candidate that I have a whole bunch of stickers for that I have to figure out what to do with is 50,000 Iowans.
Yeah.
There's people that are living in Iowa right now for the month, just going around canvassing. There's a lot of people I see out there doing good work. So we're probably going to do maybe at most one more podcast before Iowa, but I cannot wait to have this discussion to see what happens afterward. I'm very confident in my boy. I'm very confident in the Yang Gang. I'm very confident in America. And that's why I think he's going to go ahead and make it through. But that's going to do it for today's podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you so much again, Chris, for joining me.
No problem.
Hopefully the audio is good. We're kind of in the car right now. It's late. You guys know how we do it. That being said, I'll see you guys on the next episode. I will see you guys on the next episode. Yeet. Say something, Chris.
Yeet.
There we go.